Can we go mouse tasting today instead? October 31st, 2023. Today we're mostly going to be tasting heirlooms and modern varieties and anything with a name that I've grafted here and want to test for, whether I want to grow it to eat or to use in further breeding to make new apples. I really need to do this because I've collected a lot of new stuff in the last 3 or 4 years that needs to be assessed, and I kind of have to dig around to find it. And it's one thing to walk through the orchard randomly and taste this and that, but I end up forgetting what's what. So this video will largely be notes for me, what's what, how things are doing, what I want to cut out, what I want to keep, what I want to observe further, etc. We're going to start today with 2 seedlings, though, that I tasted in previous videos. I think the last video, tasting apple seedlings in the trial rows for breeding. These are both apples that tend to be on the mild side. So the flavors are more subtle. They are relatively low acid. And what often happens over and over is I'll go out there and taste a bunch of apples. My taste buds get totally blown out, and you'll eat stuff that's very acidic, very strongly flavored, very sweet, etc. And by the end, when I get to those, because they're towards the end of the row, they just kind of fall a little bit flat because they are, mild in either flavor or low in acid. So those 2 are Pinker Lady and Amber Wine. So this one's actually been sitting on my floor for a while, maybe a week, unrefrigerated, so I don't really know what to expect. But I just went and visited with my family, and I took some of these, some Cherub, which is also a lower acid apple for sure, using people as guinea pigs like I always do. Whenever someone's around, I start slipping them apple slices to see what their reactions are. And everybody loved this apple, and I've eaten several since then, and they are really good. And I enjoy them thoroughly. The flavor is very nice. There's a very apparent, this kind of complex berry-like flavor, maybe leaning towards strawberry a little bit. So right off, great texture. Let's try the other side. Yeah, it's great. Actually, the texture is really good. It's crisp, kind of coarse, which I usually think of this as a finer grained apple, but yeah, juicy. The skin is very thin. It's a great eating apple in terms of just it's a pleasant physical experience to eat the apple. The fruit flavors are this kind of mixed berry-ish type of stuff. It just varies apple to apple. Some of them are fairly strong, others are not, but it has a dimension that you don't get in, say, an apple you would get at the grocery store, which is going to have typically pretty flat flavors. If I were to put this in, say, my local co-op, and I could get them to people in this condition, I'm pretty sure a huge percentage of those people would come back and buy that apple next time. I mean, it's exciting. It looks great, which is, like it or not, looks sell in the supermarket. It's novel and it's delicious. And it's a fun eating. It's like I've always said from the very first one I ate, it's just a fun apple to eat for some reason. So yeah, all of that is encouraging, and this apple definitely needs to get out into the world. I think that the things that would improve it are just bumping up the acid just a little bit, and not that much. And like my friend Chuck doesn't like acidic things and acidic fruit, and I fed him a Cherub the other day, which is very, very low acid, and he's like, you got a winner here, because that's his thing. And I know, when I feed him apples, I'm like, you're gonna like this one because it's low acid and super sweet. So everybody's different too, so there's that factor. But for me personally, I would bump up the flavor, bump up the flesh color, if possible increase keeping time, which may actually end up being pretty good. I mean, it is related to Pink Lady, so we'll see about that. And just, bump the acid up a little bit, but not too much. I thoroughly enjoy eating these. I love eating them, and when they're around, I dig into them. However, this year they are more mild this year than in previous years, and that's probably just going to vary depending on where they're grown. All right, next up we have Amber Wine. Very firm, very fine grain, just really nice, dense, crispy, firm texture, delicious wine-like flavor. I wish you guys could taste this right now. It's just super delicious. I would bump the acid up a little bit if I could, but it's okay. It's also really good in salads. I've done that before, like a grated beet salad, which I make quite a bit, usually with like orange juice and orange slices and maybe a little cardamom. My beet salad's really good. I mean, it may not sound that good, but it can be really good. But I like to put little apple sticks in there, and these savory apples like this are perfect for that. With the savory apple category, most people, have never tasted that at all. If so, very, very subtle in, some named variety that's super ripe. For instance, like I have Sunrise over here, and this year, like right at the end of the season where they're almost overripe, I got like some of that savory dimension, but it's very uncommon. So I'll be crossing apples like amber wine. I think I already started with Sunrise to accentuate that and also add the nice modern characteristics of Sunrise. Amber wine, yeah, it's good. I really liked eating these this year with cheese, like some aged, English cheddar. Quite a bit different than eating it with cheese with like the usual kind of tart apple. This apple actually has quite a bit of potential for cooking, for culinary use. And getting creative with this characteristic. And I'm really looking forward to getting this to some chefs, to getting it growing on big, healthy trees, because I think it'll be, significantly different. I really like this apple a lot. If I were to set up a tasting, I would, I've learned now, definitely don't put the mildest apples last. Like Bite Me Cherub, Pinker Lady, Amber Wine, these apples, especially with the lower acid, or if the flavors are more subtle, those need to go in the beginning of a tasting. The whole thing of blowing out your taste buds is a very real phenomenon. But, it's interesting and useful, too, because if you've been tasting apples for an hour or two and you run into something that's just like, boom, it has a bunch of flavor and, is really distinctive, then, that's a bomb of an apple. Hey, no. Okay, before we go walking around, let's do one more apple, which I just picked off this tree up the hill. I have never really grown this apple myself. It's called Roxbury Russet. It's very, very old. I think it's often said to be the oldest apple in America. That's actually an American apple grown from seed. It is a super good keeper, pretty classic russet. It compares in the same group with like Ashmead's Kernel and Golden Russet. It'll keep really well. Like I've had these stored for a long time and they'll actually shrivel up and get all wrinkled. But when you bite into them, they're rubbery. And they just kind of crush up into these rubbery chunks. So it's not like they go mealy and mushy. At least that's been my experience in the past with ones that, other people have grown and I've stored. I grafted this when I first moved here and the tree died and I just never got around to grafting it until like a couple years ago. So this just came into fruit. This actually doesn't fit that description. It's getting kind of coarse and almost mealy. Flavor's very good though. I can't be really sure that this is actually Roxbury Russet. I mean, there's hardly any russet on it. And I think it's probably correct. It could also change character in a different year or as the branch fruits more or whatever. So I don't know what to think of it. The flavor is really good though. Yeah, the flavor is complex. The sugar acid balance is good. It's not highly acidic, but it's like on the lower end of acid, but still well balanced. It has a wine-like richness to it that I don't really know how to describe. It's very good. It's delicious. I would think that this would be a good apple to cross with amber wine or Wixen. And I've been crossing Wixen with russets, trying to get like the savory russets. That's going to be good. Trust me. Mark my words. Remember this. Savory russets are going to be a thing, and they're going to be amazing. Amazing. And out of all the russets, I would say, top of the list is Golden Russet. Second would probably be Ashmead's, also a great performer. And then Roxbury. Those are the russets I think of when I'm like, what do I want to use to breed more russets and to breed savory russets? And hopefully red flesh russets. That is also on my list. Then I've been working on that for a while, but nothing yet. Graft Roxbury Russet and grow it. It's a cool apple. It's delicious. It can be very good. It can keep great, and it's worth growing. Whether this is the real Roxbury Russet, I'll have to look that up. It has a very distinctive butt here with the calyx, kind of no comment. Okay, we're going to cruise through Frankentree here and see if we can find anything new and interesting. A lot of it's going to be the same old stuff. What is this? Oh, this is my jewel. So this is an extreme banana flavored apple usually, but I think of it as a late apple, like actually harvested in the winter time, but I'm just going to taste it real quick. All right, my jewel. Oh yeah. So this is actually ready to eat, but off of that branch, this was the waxiest one, the greasiest one, and that often indicates ripeness or overripeness. It could definitely ripen more. Already has a banana flavor, but my experience with this apple is that that just gets stronger and stronger, kind of like a banana, right? As a banana ripens, it gets more and more banana-y. At its most extreme, it's like artificial banana candy flavor. Totally disgusting. I hate that flavor. But if you were to want to breed banana-flavored apples, I would go with this seedling apple that's not ready yet, that I call pink banana or banana pink. Pomo Sinel, which is over here on this tree. White Winter Pearmain seems to have that flavor. I think I'm forgetting something, but yeah, if you're into that sort of thing. Okay, so now we're going to taste something new-ish. Whether it's ready or not, I don't know. This is an Albert Etter apple called Crimson Gold. It is obviously related to Wixon somehow, like probably in the same batch of seedlings or something like that, but they clearly have ancestry in common. And it is a savory apple. This apple was picked up by an orchard outfit called Koyama Orchards in Southern California. They're way up in the mountains. Like there's actually really good apple country in the mountains of Southern California because like here, you know, it's not too humid. It's very dry in the summer. And so there's really low disease pressure for growing apples, but it's high enough that you get cool nights all the time, and that's good for apples too. Anyway, they pick this apple up and they grow it and sell it usually in small paper bags, actually all over the country. So occasionally you can find this apple in a store labeled as Crimson Gold. This one's still a little edgy, not ripe all the way. The savory flavor has not developed yet. As I always say with all savory apples, that's like the last thing to develop. If you want them at their best and you want to experience that, it's best to hang them, on the tree longer. Anyway, Crimson Gold, we'll have to revisit that if we get to tasting apples again this season. So some of this stuff in here, I'm just going to, I'll just pick it, bite it, and then if it's any good, we'll deal with like finding out what it is. So this is my rubiot branch, and all the pollinations I made on this year, not a lot of them took, but they're all with King David, because that has produced the best red-fleshed apple I've probably ever eaten, one of my seedlings, and I'm just going all in on that cross. So I won't have seeds available because I'm going to plant every single seed I get, and I didn't get very many this year, but maybe next year I'll be able to produce a bunch and you guys can plant some too. Try whatever this is. This might be like razor russet or something. It looks like one of those russet sports of Golden Delicious. That's decent. Could use some more further ripening. This one's labeled as Dumalo. Yeah. Oh my God. That's terrible. It must be a cider apple. It's super tannic, low sugar, kind of high acid, but really bland, no flavor to speak of. Maybe it's not ripe yet, but it doesn't seem good. This is that apple that I had labeled as Laxton's Epicure. I don't think it's Laxton's Epicure. It has these dots on it, which I also saw in another apple that we're going to visit later. And someone said that might be a virus, but you'd think if it was a virus, the whole tree would be infected. These spots on this one are actually divots, like you can feel some of them. It's not bitter pit, someone mentioned that, because that turns brown. My guess is it's a physiological thing, not an infection. Anyway, this apple, if you like the kind of like classic American red apple taste that's in a decent quality apple, right, that's not a Red Delicious, I would look at this apple and also Connell Red. Connell Red is a sport of fireside that's a little bit redder. Both of those apples are good apples. They're high quality apples. This one especially has like more complexity and like fruitiness to it. That's another dimension over those apples, but they're good apples. They're pretty good apples. So if you like that flavor, try those two apples out. But I don't know what this is. It may not be Laxton's Epicure. I should look it up again and see if I can figure that out. For some reason, at some point, I decided it wasn't Laxton's Epicure. And mine is infected with virus, so I can't distribute it. Well, let's try this. This is the classic French cooking apple, Calville Blanc. This is usable now, but it could definitely stand to ripen a little bit more. It's mostly a cooking apple. For eating, I don't find it particularly interesting. It has this interesting pleated shape that's real easy to identify. Okay, this is Cox's Orange Pippin. Soft, grainy, definitely ripe. Tastes like anise. I've had good specimens of this apple before, but what as grown here, it's rarely worth eating. I just don't like them. This is the ever famous Hudson's Golden Gem. You can see it has this peculiar shape. Some of them are kind of extreme, but sort of this like drop shape if you were to turn them upside down. Okay, I just do not get this apple. I have never had one that made me want to take a second bite that I can remember. Mild, watery, tastes like bananas and pears, low acid. I'm sure it would interest someone, apparently, because it's often rated very high in taste tests, and lots of people love it. But again, it could just be my climate too. Maybe it needs a cooler climate. It's from Oregon, I believe. I'd be very, very surprised if it's not related to Golden Delicious. It is very much like a watered down extra banana Golden Delicious. It's got the speckles, it's got a little bit of russeting, it's got the color, the shape isn't that far off, so it's probably a seedling of Golden Delicious. I'm sure someone's probably done the genetics on that by now. That may even be just kind of widely considered to be what it is. I don't know if I've read that before and it's just coming out of my brain or not, but this may be getting ready now. So this is a little crab that I call Becca's. I lost 2 big branches on Frankentree this year, and it opened the tree up so I can actually get in here. That's from overbearing, by the way. I left too much fruit on. It bears fruit in these little cute clusters. Now, if you were to grow these or something similar and harvest them like this, you're breaking off the fruiting spurs. So I don't think that's a good idea, but it would be really cool and tempting to harvest them like this, like little bundles of cherries, and you can just eat the whole fruit. So this could still use some more time on the tree. As you can see, it has yellow flesh. This is a pretty crabby apple, but I think it was close to 2 weeks ago when they were even less ripe. I had some that I'd picked and some people tasted them, and almost every time people taste these, they really like them. So I don't know what that says. I mean, I think it says this has potential for sure. It also might just say that, people are fairly tolerant of these kind of like tannic flavors and, primitive crab type genetics, maybe more than I would expect them to be. I have made crosses with this. I hope to do more in the future, trying to just improve this, cross it with other crab genetics and red flesh genetics. And I just have a feeling we could make these single bite apples that retain some of these phytonutrients and, compounds like the tannins and anthocyanins. But unfortunately, you won't be able to pick them in these clusters because that will take all your fruiting wood off. So they'll have to be picked individually. But you could see like having a basket of these in the store, maybe just a little bit bigger, or on your counter, just, popping them throughout the day or something. Get off me. This is another cat, by the way, than the last videos. Her mom had kittens, and this is the last of the kittens. She's going to a new home probably within about a week. Loves attention, just like her mom. He doesn't have a name, though. None of my cats have names, just nicknames. This one's Cleocatra, Miss Pea Buddy, because every time I go pee outside, she runs up and pees on the ground next to me. I don't know, she's got a bunch of nicknames. So this is Carter Blue. You can see the intense bloom it has. Very neat. A really, really cool trait. It's a beautiful apple. So you can add Carter Blue to the list of these classic American red apples. I would say that a good way to describe the flavor of these is perfumed or floral. So there's like a flowery, perfumey kind of essence to them. I don't like it, period. I just don't like these apples. Even the very best ones like Connell Red. I just don't like the flavor. But you could add this to being an okay version of that. Like here, as grown here right now, this flesh is a little bit dry and spongy and weird. Not crazy about that, but the flavor is very, very much that exact classic flavor. I'm interested in this. What is that? It's decent, but not decent enough to look up, try to find the tag and see what it is. Here we have a Frankentree with a bunch of stuff on it. This is Betsy Russet. This one seems to have a little bit of potential. A little bit of the sort of pineapple-like flavor that some russets get, the best russets really. So Betsy Russet, worth keeping an eye on there. And we might as well revisit the apple previously known as Ice Princess. I've been eating these. They vary a little, but overall I really like them. They're kind of unique. So one viewer told me these brown spots in here are calcium, and another one said it's boron. Whatever it is, I mostly see it in this apple, although I've seen it also in one of my other seedlings this year at least. If I had to guess, I would go with the boron, but I'm just saying that whatever it is, there's like a genetic or some kind of susceptibility for this apple, so it just may have a hard time storing boron or processing or getting it or who knows what. Okay, so bottom line on this apple, I like eating it. Usually when I start eating one, I want to finish it or grab another one and try that. It's a very intriguing, compelling apple because the flavor is, I don't know what. It's hard to nail down or hard to describe or something. It just kind of makes you want to keep eating it. You know what? We just went to Frankentree and tasted a bunch of stuff. Was I like, oh, this is great, I want to keep eating it for anything? I don't remember anything. Maybe Crimson Gold when it's actually ripe. So I've been trying to think of a name. I've got some good ideas. It does have a very effervescent quality. Like I swear sometimes it almost feels like it's fizzing on your tongue, you know, kind of that. Yeah, effervescent, you know, effervescence. So something along those lines. I have a whole list of good names. Honestly, at this point, it's like, as often is the case, it's not a matter of finding a good name. It's a matter of picking amongst a bunch of good names. Yeah, on this tree, they're not too good. On this tree right next to it, they're pretty much just right. I really just like this crisp flavor, not texture, but the flavor is crisp and clean and bright and effervescent, but also rich. So I have all these apples to taste. I should be getting along here, and I'm sitting here just picking one after another of these and eating it. And I'm not just eating it, I'm checking it. Like I said, the psychology with this apple, it just keeps you wanting to test it some more. It's weird. It's a thing though. What is this? Oh, this is Scary Dave's Russet. Dry, sweet, low acid, no flavor. Hopefully that'll get better. This seems to be some kind of russet. I think it's Hereford russet. I don't know how you pronounce that in England. Probably not like that. So English apples often don't really approach the kind of crisp texture a lot of people now expect or prefer in an apple. This is coarse, grainy, tender, more along the lines of like a Cox's Orange Pippin, but more so. And that texture it's not offensive. I actually kind of like it. It's fine. It's very juicy. And it's not like mushy or mealy, so don't think that. It's just coarse and tender. This has a flavor that I'm very familiar with in apples, especially English apples and European apples, but I don't know what to call it. But it's very good. Yeah, this is an interesting, pretty delicious little apple. I'd like to fruit it more and eat it more and see what's up with that. All right, let's see what we can find in here. So a lot of these trees in this diagonal cordon row, I have grafted over. And so everywhere there's a stub like this, you can graft that to a new variety. And I've done that with maybe 3 or 4 of these trees. Unfortunately, it looks like this one has virus, which is too bad because that means everything on this tree will have virus. What I did this year is I grafted on a single scion onto every one of these trees of the apple previously known as Ice Princess. That really needs a name. What I use to index for virus because it's very susceptible, and if the plant has virus, it's going to show on that variety. So here's another one right here, which isn't showing any signs. This one isn't showing any signs. But this is what happens when you get a bunch of varieties from, random sources and graft them all together on a tree. There's a good chance you'll pick up virus. And this definitely looks like apple mosaic virus. So that's too bad. This is Columbia Russet. Another thing to remember with these is that a lot of them have just started bearing. They're new grafts, and they may develop more and change with fruiting for a few years. Okay, Columbia Russet. So far, doesn't seem very promising. Very low acid. The flavors are mild, not particularly interesting. Maybe it'll do something more interesting later. Here's one. What's this? This says Horsham Russet. Wow, look at that. Too tannic and crabby for eating, but it's just a little stunted fruit on a new graft, so give it some time. It has some nice flavors and good qualities, but just underneath a lot of tannin, thick skin. Okay, well, unfortunately my battery died. This apple seems okay, worth keeping an eye on, but I picked the last one, and since I had to leave and go get a battery, I forgot which branch it was on. I'm going to knock off for the day. I'm just not enthusiastic about eating apples right now. I'm a little tired and I've already tasted a whole bunch, and I've gotten to the point where I'm like, instead of being, yay, let's taste apples, I'm like, I have to taste another apple. But we'll get back to it in a day or two here and work our way through all these new apples when it's exciting and fun. Right, where were we? Okay, this is Gris Pontois. Overripe, tastes like a pear. Super mealy and mushy and gross. It looks very unhealthy, like the leaves died, and it looks extremely unhealthy. So I'm not judging it. That's what it's like right now. Sundance Co-op 24 or 29, not sure which. It's a good apple. So this is an apple where I would say it's a good apple, and like if I just want to sit down and eat an apple for lunch, maybe with some peanut butter or whatever, I would enjoy it and eat it, and it's a good apple. I wouldn't say it's a compelling or very interesting apple. It's hard to say, why this was selected by the co-op program. It tastes a little bit like banana. It's kind of a fairly classic, kind of average yellow apple. It could have some disease resistance. I wouldn't be surprised at all if that's the case. Again, it's a solid apple. It doesn't excite me at all. So if I were to look up this apple Sundance and it has like disease resistance, for instance, I might take it with me because of that. Otherwise, unless it improves like next year, it doesn't particularly interest me. Okay, this one says possibly Mygold. I doubt that's right. Well, this is a nice apple. I wish I knew what it actually was. Anyway, it's crisp, very nice texture, very juicy. Yeah, nothing challenging or offensive about it, but it is a little bit lackluster too. Like it doesn't have a bunch of flavor, but it's got this beautiful color. And given all those other good characteristics, as I often say now, it could just be a good canvas for breeding, right? On which to start laying over other interesting traits like red flesh. Like this is an apple I would definitely consider crossing red-fleshed apples onto because it already has this nice dark red skin. I would definitely graft this and take it with me as further assessment and possibly for breeding, whatever it is. In terms of like sugar acid balance, unremarkable. It's definitely on the sweet side. Very, very polite apple. And flavors are extremely mild. There's just not much going on here. And I do think it's ripe. Okay, now this one says it's probably Mygold. And it's different. So the other one's possibly Mygold, probably Mygold. Oh my God. If you want to breed banana flavored apples, add this one to the stable. Overwhelmingly like upfront first hit, which is how the banana flavor usually is. It'll usually get you right away. Like as soon as you bite the apple, the aromatics will start, like you'll start tasting / smelling them. Totally disgusting to me. Some people would probably just love it. Don't judge by my reaction if you like banana flavored apples. And it looks like a nice apple. It's good size. It's very crisp, juicy, kind of seems more of the modern type. I don't taste a lot else going on there, but I don't want to taste it again to find out. Okay, this says Winter Sweet Russet. Wow, what a beautiful apple. Beautiful sunrise, sunset colors, but also very rustic and russety. And like a lot of russets, it has, and it's not heavily russeted, but you can see it here like around the lenticels and stuff, and I think that's part of what matters for this. But they'll tend to feel almost light and dry, and like the flesh will be a little bit dry. This one is very grainy, coarse texture. It tastes like it's on its way to being mealy, but it's not quite there yet. Flavor-wise, it's low acid. It's intriguing, actually. Like it has this kind of thing a lot of russets have, that I'm not particularly into. It's just like this kind of mild, cloying pear-like flavors. It kind of has that, but there's also like a candy-like, vanilla-esque thing going on that is really intriguing. So, if it didn't have that, I probably would have just spit it out and been like, okay, it's just another one of those like pear-tasting, mild, cloying russets. But since it had that, I kept chewing on it and thinking like, what's that? Like that's kind of like vanilla, and it's intriguing. So since that's a trait I'm interested in, I have my apple vanilla pink has something like that, and I've tasted it here and there and other stuff, and it's so beautiful. This is a really interesting apple for potential for further breeding. So yeah, Winter Sweet Russet. There's only one apple on the tree. It does taste, if anything, overripe. If there were more apples on the tree, in other words, I don't think they would have gotten better. Okay, so this is messed up, and sometimes when an apple has a big rotten area like this, even if it doesn't go through to the other side, it will have infiltrated and soaked into the other side, just the way that like if you stored your apple with an onion, in the fridge or in a box, it would absorb the onion flavor all over the apple. We'll just bite the furthest part away we can. It's nice. This is a good example of an apple where good sugar acid balance can carry the apple regardless of a lot else. It's not super flavorful or interesting in any other way, but it's a pretty nice eating experience just because of that sugar acid balance. Works really well. A messed up fruit on a very small, very young graft. So, it seems like there's room for that one to improve as it matures a little bit. Okay, we'll hit the other side of this and then we'll move on to the next row. So up here we have Pilot, which is usually not ready by now, but we'll just try one because the tree's loaded. I left tons of fruit on this tree this year, and this is it's not the largest specimen on the tree. It's on the larger side, but this is, in other words, this is a very big apple. If thinned out more, you'd see a lot of huge apples on this tree. So this is quite edible right now, actually. It's on the early end of ripening. I think of it as a late hanging apple. It may just be like pink parfait, where it seems to ripen and then just sit there, which is such a cool trait, like storage on the tree, right? You can start eating pink parfait sometimes in November, but then it'll hang into the winter for a couple months, and it's like putting it in cold storage but on the tree. It's really neat. So maybe that's what's going on with this apple. Not that this is in any way as late as pink parfait. A long time ago I called the apple guru, the guy who wrote Old Southern Apples, Lee Calhoun. I had a phone conversation with him. I was really lucky to talk to him before he passed away. And I asked him, what apples hang into the winter late, and he mentioned Pilot was one of them, and that's why I got it. As far as eating goes and taste and everything, it's got a good sugar acid balance, like even more than the one I just mentioned. That one's maybe a little bit acidic. It's very balanced. It's very crisp. It's very juicy, thin skin, easy to eat. Flavors are mild but very pleasant and balanced and harmonious. It's not a wow flavor or anything like that. It's not sensational, but it's nice. It's a nice apple. And for me, my interest again is using this as a canvas on which to layer on different characteristics to breed interesting apples. Because who doesn't like a huge apple? It's fun. I think this one has a lot of potential. I've crossed it with Wixon, amber wine, red-fleshed apples, late-hanging apples, all kinds of stuff. And I plan to continue doing that. This year, my pollinations did not do well. I'm not sure any of them took, actually. Neat apple, though. And I sell scions of this, and I usually have a lot. And I encourage people to graft it because I think it's a really nice, it's a good, solid apple. It's a good performer. Huge apples, very, very vigorous tree. This one is Sir Prize, S-I-R Prize. Soft. I guess I missed the boat on this one. Apparently it hangs well because it's just totally overripe, but it looks perfect. It's like a classic banana leaning yellow apple. My guess is that it's not going to have much else than that going on, which so many of them don't. Wow, this is a tiny graft. It's basically a spur. That's all that's here. Florina. Wow. Yet another apple to add to the banana camp. I would say, though, overall, this is a more interesting apple than most of them. It's got a little bit more going on. It's got a really nice, firm, crisp texture. A little low in acid. I think it would benefit from a little bit more acid, but it's all right. I forget the name of this apple, but it's something Chris Hamanek sent me. I didn't know what it was. I posted on social media, and he's like, I think it's this that I sent you, and I'm pretty sure that's right. This is a very interesting apple. This thing was edible off the tree months ago. It didn't taste that much different than it does now, and it's not much less crisp. My guess was that it was a modern apple because it was so crisp and juicy, and it just seemed and I remember last year, it maintained that on the tree for a long time, and I thought, well, that's something that someone bred into this intentionally, but it turns out it probably isn't. It's probably an older apple. It just has a very interesting genetic that we could exploit for breeding. I would say, for commercial breeders, they should be very, very interested in this apple. I think that it has great potential to take that characteristic of just being able to just sit there on the tree for literally months and not change that much. You know, the downside is it doesn't have much flavor. It's very light on flavor, almost bland. The flavors it has are nice, but if you could just dial them up several notches, this would be a much more interesting apple, but we can fix that. So I'll be definitely taking this and moving it forward. And I'm going to mark this right now because I don't want to lose track of the branch again now that I've picked all the apples off. Because come spring, I'm going to be making pollinations onto this, collecting pollen. If it fruits or flowers, I'm on it. I'm blanking out on the name here. So I'm going to write Sayorit. I think that was it. Something like that. So this is an example of an apple I will definitely be taking with me when I go, which most of these I probably won't. I think it's a good idea for people to collect just all kinds of apples and some that don't seem that useful. It's not my thing though. I'm too overwhelmed with collecting useful stuff that I can use. Colomer, they look a little underripe too. A little too standard red apple for my taste, but there are some interesting flavors going around there. You know, given that it's a small graft, it could improve. Okay, this is called Pink Sweet. Oh wow, man, that is dead sweet. Almost no acid at all. The flavor is actually kind of interesting, maybe a little bit candy-like in the vanilla-leaning direction. As a way to just grow a bunch of sugar, you know, without any acid, it might be useful. But, you know, you'd have to test the sugar to find out if it really is high sugar or if it just tastes like it's high sugar because there's no acid to balance it. Coil here, I think we could try. This is Coil. Yeah, this doesn't taste quite ripe. It's, again, almost dead sweet. Not quite as much as the last one, but it's damn close. It doesn't have a lot to offer flavor-wise. We'll see how that develops. This is a cross by Freddie. I've always said Freddie Mensch because I never heard anyone say his name. He's a friend of mine, but like I don't hear him say it or anyone else I know. It's just Freddie. I think it's like Menge or Meng. Anyway, this is a cross by him between Wixon and King David. That's a guess, by the way. Wixon clearly seems like one of the parents. I think it may have been a Wixon seedling even. A lot of his seeds that he grows out, seedlings were open pollinated originally. I don't know. I think he's doing more crossing now. And he grows a lot of both of those apples. And I think he's probably right. You know, it probably is a King David Wixon cross. I would say like out of all the apples I've tasted since we restarted today, this may be the best eating apple of the lot. He sent me a cutting a long time ago, but I think he said he's barely fruited and tasted this. So it's good, you know. I mean, I've had it be real variable, like the amount of savory flavor it has varies a lot. I'll ask him if he's okay with distributing it and coming up with a name. I've called it King Wixon for years just because it's easy. Typically, I'm not into these like conjugated names like that. I don't think it's a terrible name. It's a decent sugar-acid balance. It's not highly acid at all. You definitely get some of the savory flavor, but there's a little bit of other stuff going on too. It's just kind of pleasant to eat. It's not on the top of my list, but I'm definitely interested in growing a small branch of it. And I've had several people in the orchard taste it and be enthusiastic about it. I've also used it in breeding a little bit just to mix it up with the savory apples. Okay, next row. Okay, we've tasted this before, but here's an apple called Rosnon-Puree. Now, early on in its life, I sent some of these out mislabeled as Coe's Golden Drop. So if you got Coe's Golden Drop from me ever and it looks like this, it's actually probably Rosnon-Puree. So the good washes of orange and red and pink that are all like layered, 3 layers deep with the russeting. It's just a real interesting looking apple, like great subject for oil painting. It has a candy, like fruit candy flavor. And I think it's what the English call pear drop flavor, which is some kind of a candy, an English candy, which I'd like to get some of sometime because I want to know what that tastes like so I can reference it back to the apples. So the bad, it's dry, it's spongy, it's leaning towards mealy now that it's ripe. It's just not that fun to eat in all those ways. But if one were to want, like I do, to breed fruit candy flavors into apples, I'm starting to think of mixing these, right? So I get something that tastes like watermelon and mix it with this whatever this candy flavor is, or the cherry flavor, or grape or watermelon or whatever it is. And just, mixing all these things together. So, tasting this again this year, I've tasted it many, many years, but I'm kind of like, crossing this with hard candy cider just seems like a great idea. And also maybe with my new little columnar tree that has like super strong fruit candy type of flavors. Also, this tree does seem to grow almost like a columnar dwarf. I mean, leaning in that direction anyway. It's a low vigor tree. And you see this in quite a few of these old like English, and maybe some of them might be French derived in other places. Small russety apples that kind of just are weak growers. Casual observation, that seems to be a thing. But all that said, and taking a second bite, it's mostly pear flavor. So I'm pretty sure that's what they mean by pear drop. I feel like this one's a little more complex and a little more interesting because pear flavored russets are just not my favorite. Too many russets, that's like their main dimension. There's not much else going on. It can be a little cloying, often associated with low acid, and just not really my thing. Also often associated with poor texture. This says snow sweet. Oh wow, strikingly white flesh. Flavors are mild but pleasant. Reminds me of something like, I don't know, cotton candy. On the low acid side, but not no acid or anything like that. Not sensational, not remarkable, just kind of nice to eat. This says probably cranberry. This is a pretty classic primitive red apple that I would guess came from I can see it here with red leaves, probably red wood. It has a red stem here. Yeah, I mean, it tastes like a pretty standard primitive apple, red fleshed apple with like a high astringency, that could use another couple generations of breeding to bring it out of that little bit better looking one. The texture's not good either. Kind of foamy, a bit dry, very tannic, like dry your mouth out tannic. Could be useful in cider now, otherwise, unless it improves a whole lot, I would say maybe breeding potential. This one says rosette. Okay, now that's interesting. That last apple, had all these detractors, and there just wasn't a lot that was promising besides the red flesh, but this actually has very strong flavor. I can't nail specifically what it is, but if I had to say, I would say it's blueberry. Real interesting flavor in this apple, and given like the black skin, that's interesting for breeding. I'm interested in this apple. It is astringent, not as astringent as the last one, but close. It also has crappy flesh, like foamy, dry. Yeah, not good in that department, but this flavor, especially given like the level of color, which isn't that high, there's a ton of flavor. And it seems unique. Yeah, I'm thinking it's blueberry. Not a dead ringer, but like the blueberry component with some other stuff going on. Whatever that flavor is, though, it belongs in more apples. Rosette. I would probably use that name if it wasn't already used. There's also a blush rosette from Etter. This is either a seedling or a tree that was just found growing. Maybe it's grafted. I think it's a seedling, but it's called Arts. Near here, Philo, California. My friends grow it at their orchard called the Apple Farm. It's all right. It's good for a seedling, apple that was just kind of random. I wouldn't really probably grow it myself, but I know at the Apple Farm they're fairly enthusiastic about it. Oh, here's Roxbury Russet. As far as flavor goes, this is one of the best things I've eaten today. I grew some on another tree. Well, I think we started with at the beginning of this video. Yeah, really good flavor. I'm definitely going to be using Roxbury in breeding, especially since it's also a good performer, It's a good tree. Unlike golden russet. I haven't had one that compares to the best golden russets, but, that's a really high bar to set. This is unlabeled. It's okay, but I don't see any reason to really grow it. Same with this. Take that back. This one here, it has some nice fruit candy flavor going on. Yeah, really nice. So as far as flavor goes up to this point, since we restarted today, rosette with the maybe blueberry flavor, Roxbury russet, and this are probably the most intriguingly flavored apples, right? If I bite it into, you probably noticed this already. If I bite into an apple and it's like, okay, there's a bunch of good qualities here. I can eat this, but there's not something that sets it apart and says, like, keep eating this, or this is an interesting characteristic. Maybe we can use it to breed more cool apples. I'm just not that interested. You know, if it's a little mild in flavor, but something like Pilot, say, or that other apple we talked about, Saorit, those are interesting, but because they have those characteristics that are very interesting and useful, and we could layer some flavors like this on top of it. Okay, we're going to revisit this apple. This might be useful in breeding, but I haven't really been into it for eating. It's incredibly productive. It often looks like this. Look at like the vigor and productivity of this tree compared to other things in the row. It's as high as anything, if not higher. So the good news is it's very savory. It's easy to eat. It's very juicy. It's not crisp, but it's pleasant, and it's crushy. Like, it crushes up into juice super easy. You can almost probably see all the juice leaking out of there. It looks like it's just saturated in juice. The bad news is I just don't want to eat it. And it's always like this. This is a little underripe. I think some people would like this apple. I just feel like its main use is going to be in breeding. I just always feel like I should want to eat it. I should like it, but it just doesn't do it for me. Well, here's a vigorous graft. It's called Red Ice. What is that? It tastes underripe. There's certainly nothing getting my attention in that. What is this? This says Pixie. This side's all rotten, and it's leaking through here. But this is intriguing so far. It's a pink fleshed apple. Now, there's not a lot of pink flesh there, and the flavor isn't high. I think it tastes like roses, probably. Well, as red flesh apples go, it's pretty good. You know, what we don't see a lot in red flesh apples is a very excellent texture, which this definitely has. It's very fine grained, very crisp, very juicy, very easy to eat. The skin isn't particularly too thick. It's a little bit tannic. So what it's lacking is denser color in the flesh and the flavor that would likely go along with that. This is a young graft. It's barely fruited. Find out more about where this came from, its origins, its parentage, if we know. As far as breeding potential, very high, because it has a lot of good qualities, like dessert eating qualities. It's just we need to bump that flesh color and flavor up, which again, as the graft develops and it fruits more in other years, maybe that will improve. And I would say, you know, maybe worth growing as it is, because it is novel and it's just a nice eating experience. It's has a lot of really good dessert qualities. Let me taste the very reddest part I can find here. Like, it doesn't seem to have almost any real red flesh flavor. I thought I detected some kind of like floral note, like roses, which sometimes red flesh apples will taste like rose. So that might come out in other years. Or again, if it was any conditions where the pink flesh developed more, it's probably going to have more flavor. Looks like we missed one cherry crush here. So there seems to be a thing with flavors in apples where some apples, as they ripen, whatever flavor component they have develops more and it becomes stronger even when the apple gets soft and gross. Cherry Crush is not one of those, and neither is Cherry Cox, its parent, which, you know, I've observed this for years with these apples. Sweet 16 would be another example where the flavors go downhill, they just disappear. Like, there's no cherry flavor here at all, and there's not much else. It's just kind of a washed out apple flavor. Interesting to note, you know, since some apples may gain flavor in storage and others may just lose it. Okay, so I think we're done with non-seedling apples. I was just walking down here to look at some other stuff that we already looked at. Weirdly, the very first apple I picked off this tree, Wixonex rubeat 13-4, was the best and ripest specimen I've ever tasted. Everything I've picked off this year since then, plainly underripe. So we just got really, really lucky. I keep thinking I can come out here and find one. I'll even shake the tree and knock one off. They're just not ready yet. In the past, the problem I've seen is they kind of seem to tend to just not ripen well. And it's a very tart apple, so you definitely want it ripe. Kind of don't want to waste any more of them by picking them too early. So I have really high hopes for that apple being great, but it's like got to be patient here. I'm going to get these amber wine apples off the tree here. When I was out here last time in a recent video, it just was kind of falling flat. because of low acid and everything. But that was at the end of tasting a bunch of apples. Since then, I fed it to a bunch of people. All of them liked it. I've been eating them and enjoying them. It's not the apple I would taste at the end of everything else. Yesterday or the day before, I took some apples down to this place I do work trade with, and a couple of the employees there, I used them as guinea pigs. And one of them, that was their amber wine was their favorite out of the lot. And it was really good. Looking really forward to fruiting this on a big, healthy, established tree. Oh, also worth mentioning, this morning I came out and got one of the last 3 of the musky flavored apple, which I was working on a name for this morning. The worst looking one on the tree is all like scabby. It gets scabbed really bad, unfortunately. And I came out here, like I took one bite and then I just kept biting. I was just... Talk about an intriguing flavored apple. And by the time I got back to the house, it was just a core. I've been working on a name for this. I was working on it this morning, and I got it narrowed down. I wanted to call it muskmelon, but then Chris Semantics like texted me and he's like, there's already a muskmelon. It's an heirloom apple. And I'm like, damn, who'd have thunk? But I do think that it's a good idea to call musky apples like a category, musk apples. Maybe I just didn't taste anything in the past that was strong enough to be like, wow, I need to think about what that flavor is. But since getting this apple and tasting it and having it be so strong and obvious again this year, and thinking about it and giving it a name, now I taste it in other apples, but nowhere near as strong as this. But it's encouraging to know that it's a flavor component that's coming up elsewhere, so we might be able to gang those genes up. I'll also be paying attention to which seedlings taste like this and how many of them have the same parents, Rubaiyat, Pink Parfait. I think I tasted another one that had Pink Parfait as a parent, but I can't remember for sure. All right, signing off here.